What if I told you there are cities in the United States that, under the right conditions, might one day become part of another country? Sounds impossible, right? But history says otherwise. Borders have shifted, nations have split, and unlikely alliances have formed. Let's dive into some of the most fascinating U.S. cities with ties, tensions, and twists of fate that might make them candidates for a different national flag. We're not predicting the future, but we are imagining wild scenarios that just might make sense if history took a different turn. First up, Alaska. Not just the biggest state by land, but the one with the deepest historical connection to Russia. Back in 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from the Russian Empire for $7.2 million. That's about 2 cents per acre. At the time, people thought it was a terrible deal. They even called it Seward's folly. But Russia's influence didn't disappear. There are still Russian Orthodox churches, cultural roots, and even Russian-speaking communities in parts of Alaska. Imagine a world where economic hardship, political divide, or regional isolation made Alaskans feel closer to Moscow than to Washington, D.C. Could a future independence movement open the door for a Russian alliance? Unlikely, yes, but not unthinkable. Now let's head south to Texas. Texas has always had a big personality and a complicated history. It was its own country once, remember? The Republic of Texas existed from 1836 to 1845 before it became the 28th state of the U.S. Today, some Texans still talk about secession. Add to that the deep economic and cultural ties with Mexico, shared history, bilingual populations, intertwined economies, and the ingredients for a surprising shift are there. Imagine a scenario where the U.S. fractures politically. What if Texas chose independence again, and later formed an economic or political alliance with Mexico? Unlikely, but the roots of that connection go deep. Let's talk about Puerto Rico. While not a state, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory with a long history of wanting more autonomy, or even independence. Polls show that many Puerto Ricans want statehood, but a significant portion support independence. If the U.S. ever refused statehood permanently, could Puerto Rico go its own way and align more closely with a nearby Latin American country? The Dominican Republic is just across the sea. Shared culture, shared language, shared Caribbean identity. It's possible. Now let's move to Detroit. It might sound strange to think of Detroit ever joining another country, but hear this out. Detroit is just across a narrow river from Windsor, Ontario in Canada. In fact, many people commute daily across the US-Canada border there. The cities are intertwined, culturally, economically, and socially. If the US and Canada ever merged, Detroit might be one of the first cities to fully integrate into a binational region. It might not leave the US, but it could become part of a massive cross-border metro with Canada. Let's head west to San Diego. Bordering Tijuana, San Diego is deeply connected to Mexico. Families, trade, daily life. It all crosses the border constantly. If a future crisis ever drastically weakened U.S. control of border regions, could areas like San Diego feel more aligned with their Mexican neighbors than with federal power? Again, a far-fetched thought, but the cultural and economic ties are undeniable. Now let's take a turn toward Miami. Yes, it's a proud American city, but it's also the most Latin American city in the U.S. Cuban, Venezuelan, Colombian, and Argentinian influences dominate the culture. Spanish is spoken more than English in many areas. If Florida were ever to seek independence, and let's not forget, that's a conversation that has come up before, could Miami position itself as a new capital of the Americas? A hub of commerce, culture, and power for Latin America? It wouldn't need to join another country. It could lead a new regional alliance. Now let's look at Hawaii. The Hawaiian Kingdom was an independent nation until it was overthrown in 1893. It was annexed by the U.S. in 1898 and became a state in 1959. But that annexation? It's always been controversial. To this day, native Hawaiian activists continue to call for independence, or even the return of the Hawaiian monarchy. So here's the big question. Could Hawaii ever split from the United States and become a sovereign nation again? Or could it align itself more with Pacific powers like Japan or Australia in a bold, strategic shift? In today's rapidly changing world, that idea isn't as impossible as it once sounded. Now let's talk about a true global powerhouse, New York City. This isn't just a city, it's the global capital. Finance, culture, politics, all roads lead to NYC. So imagine this. If the US government ever faced a major collapse or crisis, could New York City break off and become its own independent city-state? Think Singapore style. It already has the wealth, the influence, and the infrastructure to survive on its own. Could it align with global superpowers? Maybe even become part of a new Atlantic Economic Union? It's wild, but it's not beyond imagination. And now, a place few think about, but one with major potential: Guam. This tiny US territory sits out in the Pacific, thousands of miles from the mainland. It's strategic, it's unique, and it's culturally distinct. There have been real independence movements here, and if the US ever pulled back its military presence in the Pacific, Guam could easily turn toward Japan, the Philippines, or other regional allies for partnership and protection. A future without the US? It's a long shot, but not off the table. Now let's be clear. None of these scenarios are likely, but they're possible. And that's what makes this thought experiment so exciting. History twists, borders shift, powers rise and fall. So, could any of these American cities or territories ever leave and join another country? Probably not. But if it ever happened, it would be one of the most jaw-dropping moments in US history. Let us know in the comments. What city do you think could break away or realign in the future? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you love diving into these bold, imaginative what-if stories. Until next time, keep questioning, keep imagining.